feel it, don't you? That constant low-grade hum of anxiety. The feeling that you're always one step behind, that you're not doing enough, not being enough. You're overwhelmed by the endless to-do lists, the constant pressure to optimize, to hustle, to be perfect. Your mind is a chaotic, noisy, and exhausting place to be, and you're desperate for a moment of peace, a moment of clarity, a moment of simplicity. In the next few minutes, the ghost of a 16th century French philosopher is going to give you the key to unlock your own mind. You will gain the power to silence the noise, to find clarity in the chaos, and to build a life that is not just successful, but serene. And you'll soon know the difference between the complexity that the world demands and the simplicity that your soul craves. You will learn not just how to manage your life, but how to actually live it with a sense of ease, of grace, and of profound, unshakable peace. We need to talk because we have been scammed. We have been sold a vision of the good life that is a recipe for misery. We've been taught that success is about more money, more followers, more achievements, more possessions, more experiences. We've been conditioned to believe that happiness lies on the other side of the next goal, the next purchase, the next promotion. But what if this relentless pursuit of more is the very thing that is making us so unhappy? What if the secret to a good life is not addition, but subtraction? What if the path to peace is not through complexity, but through a radical and deeply countercultural simplicity? Therefore, you are not just stressed and overwhelmed. You are a victim of a cultural conspiracy that has convinced you to trade your inner peace for a pile of shiny, meaningless objects. This isn't a new problem. 500 years ago, in a world that was, in its own way, just as chaotic and overwhelming as ours, a French nobleman named Michel de Montaigne decided to do something radical. At the age of 38, he retired from public life, locked himself away in the library of his castle, and began a journey. Not a journey to conquer the world, but a journey to understand himself. He was tired of the noise, the ambition, the endless performance of public life. He was tired of trying to be someone he wasn't. And in that quiet, dusty library surrounded by his books and his own thoughts, he discovered a philosophy of life that is more relevant, more necessary, and more liberating today than it has ever been. Montaigne is the forgotten prophet of our anxious age. While other philosophers were trying to build grand, complex systems to explain the universe, Montaigne was interested in something much more humble and much more difficult: how to live a good, simple, and peaceful life, right here, right now, in this messy, imperfect, and often chaotic world. He is the patron saint of the overwhelmed, the anxious, and the existentially exhausted. And his message is a lifeline for those of us who are drowning in the complexity of modern life. His philosophy can be boiled down to a single, revolutionary idea: stop trying so damn hard. Stop trying to control everything. Stop trying to be perfect. Stop trying to have all the answers. Stop trying to live up to some impossible ideal of who you think you should be. And instead, learn to do something that has become almost impossible in our modern world. Learn to just be. To be who you are, where you are, with all your flaws, your contradictions, and your beautiful, messy humanity. This is not a philosophy of apathy or resignation. It is a philosophy of radical self-acceptance. And it is the key to unlocking a level of peace and freedom that you have probably never even imagined was possible. But how do we do it? How do we escape the cult of complexity and embrace the power of simplicity? Montaigne gave us a roadmap, a set of practical, psychological tools for reclaiming our own minds. And today, we are going to unpack that roadmap. We are going to learn from the master, because it is time to stop managing your life and start living it. Let's start with the root of our modern misery, the obsession with control. We believe that if we can just control our circumstances, our careers, our relationships, our bodies, our minds, then we will finally be happy. We create elaborate plans, set ambitious goals, and try to micromanage every aspect of our existence. We are like a nervous passenger on an airplane, white-knuckling the armrests, trying to will the plane to stay in the air. But this desire for control is an illusion, a dangerous and exhausting illusion. Therefore, you are not the pilot of the airplane of your life. You are a passenger. And the more you try to fly the plane, the more miserable you will be. Montaigne understood this on a deep, visceral level. He lived in a time of religious wars, of plagues, of political instability. He saw firsthand how fragile life is, how quickly our plans can be shattered by the unpredictable winds of fate. And he realized that the source of our suffering is not the chaos of the world, but our own arrogant belief that we can and should be able to control it. The Stoic philosophers, who Montaigne deeply admired, had a name for this. They called it the dichotomy of control. They taught that the key to a peaceful life is to understand the difference between what is in our control and what is not, and to focus our energy exclusively on what is in our control. And what is in our control? Only one thing: our own mind, our own thoughts, our own judgments, our own responses. Everything else, the weather, the economy, the opinions of others, our own health, our own death, is outside of our control. And to waste our precious life force trying to control these things is the very definition of insanity. It is like trying to command the tides. You will only end up exhausted, frustrated, and soaking wet. The more you try to control, the more you suffer. The more you let go, the more peace you find. It is the great paradox of life. But how do you do this in practice? How do you let go of the addiction to control? Montaigne's answer was simple but profound. You practice the art of self-observation. While the world was screaming for certainty, for answers, for control, Montaigne withdrew into the quiet of his own mind and simply watched. He became a living experiment in the human condition. And what he found was not clarity, but a whirlwind. Contradictions, fears, confused desires, inexplicable impulses. All the things that most of us try to hide, to ignore, to fix. He chose to confront them, not as a judge, but as a curious and compassionate listener. His famous essays are not a work of philosophy in the traditional sense. They are a record of this process. He is thinking out loud on the page. He is sharing his doubts, his weaknesses, his changes of opinion. He is not trying to teach you what to think. He is trying to show you how to think, how to be with yourself. He wrote, "I am human, and nothing human is alien to me." In other words, everything that resides in you, no matter how dark, how confusing, how shameful it may seem, is a legitimate part of your humanity. And the moment you stop fighting it, the moment you stop judging it, the moment you can just look at it with a sense of curious acceptance, it begins to lose its power over you. The shame dissolves. The anxiety softens. The need for control begins to relax. This is the beginning of true simplicity. It is the simplicity that comes from no longer being at war with yourself. It is the peace that comes from accepting your own messy, imperfect, and glorious humanity. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a mystery to be lived. And the more you can embrace that mystery, the more you will find the peace you have been so desperately seeking. But there is another layer to this, because even if you start to accept yourself, you still have to deal with the one inescapable fact of life. Everything changes, and our resistance to this fundamental truth is the second great source of our suffering. Most of us live as if life should be a straight line. We believe that if we can just achieve a certain level of success, or find the perfect partner, or reach a certain age, then everything will finally fall into place. We will have arrived, we will be happy, we will be safe. But this is a fantasy, a childish and dangerous fantasy. Life is not a straight line, it is a river. It is a constant, unpredictable, and often turbulent flow. Our thoughts change, our bodies age, people come and go. Our desires transform, our certainties dissolve. Nothing is fixed, nothing is guaranteed, nothing is definitive. And to try to live as if it were, to try to build a dam in the middle of the river, is to set yourself up for a lifetime of frustration, disappointment, and suffering. Therefore, you are not just resisting change, you are resisting reality itself. Montaigne saw this with a clarity that is almost painful. He wrote, "I do not portray being, I portray passing." He understood that the self is not a static entity, but a continuous process of becoming. He was not interested in who he was, but in who he was becoming, moment by moment. He embraced the flux. He danced with the uncertainty. And in that dance, he found a profound sense of freedom. How do we learn to dance this dance? We start by changing our relationship with our own thoughts and feelings. Most of us are fused with our thoughts. We believe that we are our thoughts. If we have an anxious thought, we become an anxious person. If we have a sad thought, we become a sad person. But you are not your thoughts. You are the sky, and your thoughts are the weather. The weather is constantly changing. Sometimes it is sunny, sometimes it is stormy, but the sky remains. The sky is the vast, open, and unchanging awareness that is your true nature. And the more you can identify with the sky, rather than the weather, the less you will be thrown around by the storms of your own mind. This is the practice of mindfulness, a practice that the Stoics and Montaigne would have recognized as their own. It is the practice of observing your thoughts without getting caught in them, of feeling your emotions without being consumed by them. You see a thought arise. I'm going to fail this presentation. Instead of immediately believing it and spiraling into anxiety, you just notice it. You say to yourself, there is the thought that I am going to fail. You are creating a space between you and the thought. And in that space is your freedom. You can choose whether to believe it. You can choose whether to act on it. You are no longer a slave to your own mind. This practice extends to everything in life. You lose your job. Instead of immediately spiraling into despair, you observe the feelings of fear and uncertainty. You allow them to be there without judgment. And then, from that place of calm observation, you can ask yourself, what is the opportunity here? What can I learn from this? What is the next right step? You are no longer a victim of your circumstances, you are a student of them. You are learning to surf the waves of life rather than being crushed by them. This is not about being passive. It is not about giving up. It is about being intelligent. It is about conserving your energy for the things you can actually control and letting go of the things you can't. It is about learning to flow with the river of life rather than trying to swim against it. It is the ultimate act of surrender. But it is not a surrender of defeat. It is a surrender to wisdom, a surrender to reality, a surrender to peace. But there is one final piece of Montaigne's philosophy that is perhaps the most radical and the most liberating of all. And it has to do with the one thing that we are all ultimately terrified of: death. For most of us, death is the ultimate enemy. It is the great, terrifying void that we spend our entire lives trying to ignore, to deny, to outrun. We fill our lives with noise, with distraction, with ambition, all in a desperate attempt to forget that one day it will all end. But Montaigne had a very different perspective. He believed that the fear of death is the source of almost all our anxiety and suffering. And he believed that the only way to truly live is to learn how to die. He wrote, "To philosophize is to learn how to die." Therefore, he was not being morbid, he was being profoundly practical. What did he mean by this? He meant that we need to practice the art of dying every single day, not by being reckless or suicidal, but by constantly reminding ourselves of the impermanence of everything, of our own lives, of the lives of our loved ones, of our possessions, of our achievements. This is not to make us sad or nihilistic. It is to make us appreciate the incredible, precious and fleeting gift of this present moment. When you know that you are going to die, you stop wasting your time on trivial things. You stop worrying about the opinions of others. You stop postponing your joy. You start living. You start loving. You start paying attention. The practice of memento mori, remember you will die, is one of the most powerful spiritual practices ever devised. You can do it right now. Just take a moment, close your eyes, and imagine that this is your last day on earth. What would you do? Who would you call? What would you say? What would you no longer care about? That feeling of clarity, of urgency, of love, of profound gratitude, that is the feeling of being truly alive. And you can access that feeling at any moment just by remembering that your time is limited. When you learn to live with death as your constant companion, as your advisor, your fear of it begins to dissolve. And when you are no longer afraid of death, you are no longer afraid of life, you are free. Free to take risks, free to be vulnerable, free to love with your whole heart, free to be who you truly are, without apology, without reservation. You have embraced the ultimate uncertainty, and in that embrace you have found the ultimate peace. This is the gift of Montaigne. It is the gift of a life lived with awareness, with acceptance, and with a deep and abiding sense of peace. It is the gift of simplicity in a world that worships complexity. It is the gift of letting go in a world that is obsessed with control. It is the gift of being human in all our messy, beautiful, and fleeting glory. It is not an easy path. It is a path that requires courage, honesty, and a willingness to go against the grain of our entire culture. But it is the only path that leads to a life that is not just survived, but truly, deeply, and soulfully lived. And that, my friend, is a life worth living. Let's bring this down to earth. How do you actually start to live like Montaigne in the 21st century? It's not about retiring to a castle. It's about building a castle within your own mind, a sanctuary of peace and clarity in the midst of the chaos. Here are a few practical ways to start laying the foundation. First, the practice of intellectual humility. Our world is obsessed with expertise, with having an opinion on everything, with being right. Montaigne's motto was, "What do I know?" This was not a statement of ignorance, but of profound wisdom. It is the recognition that the world is infinitely more complex than our tiny minds can ever grasp. And that true intelligence is not about having all the answers, but about being comfortable with not knowing. So, the next time you find yourself in a conversation, try an experiment. Instead of trying to prove your point, just listen. Instead of forming an immediate opinion, just get curious. Ask questions. Say, "That's interesting. Tell me more." Or even more radically say, "I don't know enough about that to have an opinion." You will feel a profound sense of relief. The pressure is off. You don't have to be the expert. You just have to be a curious, open-minded human being. Second, the art of indifference to circumstance. This is a core Stoic idea that Montaigne lived by. It is the practice of detaching your inner state from your outer circumstances. You get a promotion, and great. You get fired? Okay. You are praised? Fine. You are criticized? Fine. This is not about being a robot. It is about recognizing that your inner peace is too precious to be handed over to the random, unpredictable events of the world. You can practice this every day. When you are stuck in traffic, instead of fuming, you can choose to listen to a podcast or just enjoy the quiet. When it rains on your vacation, instead of complaining, you can choose to read a book or have a deep conversation. You are not controlling the circumstances, but you are controlling your response to them. And in that response lies your power and your peace. Third, the discipline of self-familiarity. Montaigne's essays were a 1,000-page exercise in getting to know himself. You don't need to write a book, but you do need to create a regular practice of checking in with yourself. This could be journaling for 10 minutes every morning. It could be a weekly artist date where you take yourself out to a museum or a park. It could be a daily meditation practice where you simply sit and observe the weather of your own mind. The goal is not to analyze or to fix yourself. The goal is simply to become familiar with your own inner landscape, to know your patterns, your triggers, your desires, your fears, to become your own best friend. Because you cannot be at peace with a stranger, and for most of us, we are strangers to ourselves. Fourth, and finally, the cultivation of a room of one's own. This is both a literal and a metaphorical practice. Montaigne had his library. Virginia Woolf wrote about the need for a room of one's own for any woman who wanted to be a writer. You need to find your own space, your own time, where you can be free from the demands and the expectations of the world. It could be a corner of your apartment. It could be a half hour before anyone else in your house wakes up. It could be a walk in the park during your lunch break. This is your sacred time. This is the time where you are not a parent, not a partner, not an employee. You are just you. And in that space you can read, you can think, you can dream, you can do nothing. You are refilling your own well. You are coming home to yourself. These are not just techniques. They are a way of life that is quieter, slower, and deeper than the one that our culture is trying to sell us. It is a life that is built not on the frantic pursuit of more, but on the quiet cultivation of enough. It is a life that finds its joy not in the spectacular, but in the ordinary. In a good conversation, in a walk in the woods, in a shared meal, in the simple, profound, and often overlooked miracle of being alive. This is the wisdom of Montaigne. It is the wisdom of simplicity. And it is a wisdom that has the power to save us from ourselves.